program dedicated to protecting you from legal and financial mayhem. When it comes to personal finance, I believe the single most important thing is protecting ourselves legally. Because what does it matter how brilliantly I invest or how diligently I save if there is a greater than 40% chance of losing assets to a long-term illness, an expensive divorce, taxes? This can be capital gains taxes, estate taxes, not to mention ordinary lawsuits. We all know that we're living in a very litigious society, but it comes as an unwelcome surprise that we are more likely to be involved in a legal battle with a former loved one than with a stranger. So it's critically important for all of us to protect ourselves and our finances and our families legally. I am asset protection attorney Ann-Margaret Carrozza, joined today by two terrific guest co-hosts. The first is Ann Woolsey, a journalist and the founder of Maverick River Media. Welcome to the program, Ann.
Thank you, Ann-Margaret.
And my guest co-host joining me for the second time on The Laws of Your Money is my son, representing the Gen Z perspective on what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the program, Billy Duke.
Thank you so much for having me, Mom. And it's great sitting next to you as well. I'm excited to be the Gen Z voice.
Awesome. I hope you mean that. So everyone has read about the great wealth transfer. The oldest of the baby boomers are passing away, and they are bequeathing a record amount of money to millennials and Gen Z heirs. We estimate that $100 trillion is changing hands generationally over the next 15 years. And an estimated 36 trillion of that will fall into the hands of Gen Z folks. Normally on this show, we talk about protecting ourselves from external wealth threats, liability, taxes, long-term care. But I want to focus today on internal threats to wealth. I am a lifelong student of human behavior, especially when it comes to finances. In my estate planning practice, I have been blessed to have worked with over 25,000 people.
Wow.
And I really study which careers, which behaviors allow people to save and invest a lot of money. And I watch the opposite. Some people, no matter how much they make, they're broke or they are in debt. You know, it's not uncommon in my office to have a neurologist making $700,000 a year who is in the red on a balance sheet because he's living beyond his means, and he has to borrow money from his blue-collar elderly parents, a retired cop, a retired nurse, who are worth $2 million, right? Because they bought a house 50 years ago that has quadrupled in value, and they've saved money. You know, so my point is always that no amount of money is inexhaustible, whether it is an inheritance, a settlement on a lawsuit, a lottery win. I've had 2 clients who have won the lottery, and one client won it twice.
Wow.
You know, isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
He is not someone who lost it all, but a huge percentage of lottery winners lose it all because they are just out of control financially before the big win. So if we are a train wreck with $2,000, we're going to be a train wreck with $20 million. So let's talk about today some strategies for keeping more of what comes into our hands. And I want to start with a Bank of America study, which recently found that Gen Z people are out of control financially. What do you have to say about this, Billy? Do you agree with it?
Well, I think it's funny because on the one hand, Gen Z may be out of control with their spending, but nobody who's listening knows my mother unless they know about her extreme saving habits. This is the woman, when we were growing up, she would reuse paper towels.
Okay.
She could hear the sound of the paper towel ripping from across the house. So you might take it to an extreme, but you know what? I do agree that Gen Z would do well to focus on how best to save. And it's interesting, we have data from Intuit which says that 59% of Americans aged 18 to 25, that's my people, cite having enough money put aside as a top priority. So this is definitely a conversation that I think Gen Z wants to engage in.
And do you, I mean, yes, the paper towel, I hate wasting things, but I just want, for the record, I don't reuse a dirty paper towel. But let's look at the situation where we have just washed our hands.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay, so our hands are totally clean. They happen to be wet. So if I dry my hands on a paper towel, I will then take that paper towel and let it dry somewhere so I can use it to wipe up spills on the floor. I don't think anyone listening to this would think that that's extreme.
Well, and that's what makes you my mother.
Okay. And you are the mother of a Gen Z person. How do you deal with saying no to an ask when, you know, maybe all of his friends have A, B, and C? Do you find that it's difficult to say no?
So I'm here, Gen X. Thank you, representing. One thing that I think is really different, and I hear you and Billy chatting, is that my parents didn't talk to me about money.
Interesting.
And my father was very, very successful. Bless him. He's passed now, but he was so successful. But never a conversation about my bank account, my savings. Ann and I have known each other for a long time. I wish it was longer, and I had been the saver. But with my son, he's a bit of a pandemic kid, and he's a gamer, which during the pandemic was a lovely blessing. He could play with his friends. But I realized that money could start flying out the door. So I put him on a gaming budget.
Wow.
And he was like, my friends aren't on a gaming budget. But I said, you know, he needs to know. I said, there's 2 rules, $20 a month, and you have to ask me before you buy anything. And he is now 17. This started when he was like 10. And he still asks me. He comes in and says, Mom, can I buy this? So he had to consciously be aware of the money we were spending. And then he just got his first job. So I'm having him put 20% into savings in his own little account. He has to calculate what is 20 and put it into savings. And he's actively doing it, not spending the money. So I just think talking to your children about it. Yeah. And one more thing, I'm not going to call out any coffee company, but if I see these kids spending $8 on a coffee, and I'm like, stop, you know, go
my latte in hand.
Deli coffee. But, you know, I try to just tell him, like, some things are worth it and some things aren't. Don't drink your wealth at an $8 drink.
Don't drink your wealth. I love that.
And try to save what you can. So having the conversations right there, that's a difference in the way I grew up, and I hope I can teach him well.
That's amazing. You know, I think saving is a skill like anything else. It doesn't just come naturally to a lot of people. Everyone who knows me knows that I was totally out of control with credit cards in my 20s. I had very nice clothes, but I thought that was the highest and best purpose of money. And when there wasn't money, there was still credit, so you can buy whatever you want. And I distinctly remember being out with girlfriends one night, and the conversation came to one friend who wasn't there, and someone mentioned that she had $10,000 saved in a bank account. And I remember thinking, why on earth does she have that money in the bank when she could be buying such beautiful clothes?
Oh, that's so funny.
I thought it was just so silly. But if we don't have these skills, and I really commend you, Anne, for, setting up these structures for your son, because at the end of the day, I believe that our ability to say no to ourselves in many areas of life, not allowing the thoughtless comment to come out of our mouths, not having a second helping of dessert at a party, or not spending more than we should. This is all delayed gratification. And did anyone remember, Anne, the marshmallow experiment? Did you ever
Yes.
read about that?
And that's made a resurgence in popularity.
Yes.
Really?
It's on TikTok.
I just saw it
absolutely.
in a movie. It was just, yes, I remember that.
So there were 5 toddlers, and it was an experiment. And the researcher put 2 marshmallows in front of all of them, left the room, before leaving said to them, if you don't eat those 2 marshmallows, when I come back, I'll give you 2 more. And some of the kids were able to withstand the urge, and some of the kids weren't. And the ones who were able to say no to themselves, or to say not now, they tracked these kids later in life, and they were hugely successful.
Wow.
So I think, that's something that we all need to work on. Now, in my office, I work with several Gen Z people who are, entering the workforce now. And I really feel like they are a different breed in so many ways. And they all come in with those, big fancy drinks. Yes, these fancy $8 drinks. And some of them, I never see them in the same outfit twice.
Oh, yeah.
Now, a couple of years ago, I did an experiment, and you may remember this, Billy. I did not buy a stitch of clothing for 2 years, right? I mean, who amongst us doesn't have more than enough clothes to last the rest of their lives? And it was very interesting. It was liberating. And I found I was becoming more creative again, like back when you were in college and didn't necessarily have the money to buy whatever you want. And I think if we can use what we have, repurpose what we have, repair as opposed to replace, I think we would all be well advised to learn a few simple sewing stitches, right? And absent sewing, you can still be creative. I had a black sweater one day, and I noticed it had a little hole in it. And instead of taking the time to sew it, I thought it would be quicker to take a black Sharpie, and I colored my skin beneath the hole.
That is so you.
And it looked fine, but the kicker was the next morning when I took a shower, I'd forgotten all about it, and I thought I was dying when I looked in the mirror and saw this big black spot on my arm.
Oh, my God.
But we need to be creative. And do you have any money-saving tips, Billy?
Well, it's interesting because Gen Z in particular right now, I think really needs to focus on saving, myself included. I'm a California resident, and we know from the California Housing Department that individuals who make $100,000 are now considered low income in many California counties. And that particularly applies to Gen Z. And I really look at some of the kitchen table lessons I got from my mother growing up about saving. And it was interesting because I feel like as a parent, you focused on, we didn't ever go to Disney World, but in place of that, every Saturday we were out at nature preserves. We were biking, you, me, my brother, my father. And so we still got, the family time. We got the excitement of being together and doing activities, but we still stretched the dollar. And I think for Gen Z, what this is all going to come down to is, what did those kitchen table lessons look like? Was good saving modeled in the home? Was wild spending seen as something to avoid? Was the dollar seen as an earned commodity and not as something just expendable? I think you did a pretty good job of that.
Thank you, Billy. But I wonder, Anne, and I'd be interested in your thoughts on this. Do you think as we move away from cash, that expenditures don't really resonate? I was in a drugstore last night with my younger son, and, he just put his phone near somehow the cash register, and we walked out with our stuff. So the acquisitions sort of just magically happen.
And the other thing is not just when you're in a store, but when you're home at night and you can double click Apple Pay. I would say it's a little like dieting, like don't buy anything after 8 p.m.
Exactly.
Because you're like, I need that bean bag that's 90 feet long. Like, no, you don't. But I do think just it's not real tangible money. So you have to be aware of what that cost is and keep yourself on a budget. I also, simple things. I never order the specials in restaurants. They're always more expensive. I try not to even hear them because then I have no control over my bill.
Right.
You know what I
$44
do?
Dover sole.
I think I embarrass everyone for different reasons. But whenever we go out to eat, I pay cash, right?
Yes.
Because I don't want to see some credit card bill for a meal that I ate 6 weeks ago.
If I had a dime for every time my dad pulls out a card and she says, no, I don't want to see it on the bill.
But the other thing I do when they describe this lovely sounding special, I just ask very neutrally, and how much is that, right? You shouldn't be afraid to ask the server how much that is.
And they never tell you, and there's a reason.
There's a reason, absolutely. Okay, let's switch tracks a little bit. And now I am talking to the baby boomers who are listening. And as we prepare our estate planning for the objects of our affection, our millennial and Gen Z children and grandchildren, how can we give them the best chance of being successful with the money that they are inheriting? And I want to start with the single biggest mistake that I see out there in the estate planning world, and that is naming a minor directly as a beneficiary in your will, in your trust, as a contingent beneficiary on life insurance or a retirement plan. Yes, I know that this minor child is your favorite person in the world, but a minor cannot inherit assets directly, and a court will become involved. And this goes back to Jackie Coogan. I don't think anyone remembers who that is, but you may know that Jackie Coogan was a famous child actor in the 1930s and was perhaps the most famous person, I think, together with Shirley Temple during the Great Depression. And he earned a ton of money at the time, and his parents were, quote unquote, managing it for him. And when he reached adulthood, he had nothing because the mother spent it on fur coats and fancy cars. And every state in the United States enacted so-called Jackie Coogan legislation, which says that when a minor receives money through work or through an inheritance, the court must appoint someone to oversee this money. And in New York State, we call these overseers guardian ad litem. And if you mention that phrase to a lawyer, their eyes will light up. It's like a Scooby snack that the judge hands out to their colleagues and cronies and friends, and you get to oversee little Johnny's money, and you get a nice percentage of it every year.
Oh, that's
so
fascinating.
Anyone who has a youngster in their lives, you need to create a little trust for them. Now, this trust can be a revocable trust, and you don't even have to put any money in it now. But you create the trust, it will have its own tax ID number, and this little trust can be the named beneficiary on your insurance policy, in your trust, in your will, and that will keep the government out of your family finances. The other thing that I would recommend that we do within this trust is to not say that little Johnny gets everything when he's 21. That is way too young. There are studies that a 21-year-old does not even have a fully developed frontal cortex and lacks impulse control. And, I would be concerned about a 21-year-old. Statistically, they are still in college, and I don't want to interfere with college financial aid that child may be receiving. So I recommend that everyone use the age of 25 as the start. And this is what I have in my estate planning. No one gets anything until they're 25. And when they're 25, they only get a third. And then they get a second bite at the apple 5 years later. They would get half of what's left of their share. And then 10 years later, they would get the entire distribution. This guards against inexperienced decision-making. If the young person made bad investments or had a bad relationship, that they're not going to lose everything. We want to look at our loved ones, and I keep coming back to the phrase that we need to change the conversation from who is going to get my assets to how are they going to get the assets. If I have a loved one who has special needs, a developmental disability, a psychiatric diagnosis, substance abuse, someone is on the autism spectrum and they're 8 years old and we don't know, what's going to be when they reach adulthood, we want to customize the planning. And that is, the greatest gift that we can give to youngsters. And I view estate planning, and it sounds silly, I guess, but it is our last act as a parent. We want to set up these children for success.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you know what? I think that delayed gratification that we were talking about, it makes total sense to delay. The age of 25 also is smart just from a career standpoint. We're talking about good saving habits and the making sure young people know the value of a dollar. And I think 2 years out of college, which you're 25 or 2 or 3 years out of college, you've now also gotten the chance to learn a little bit about the value of a dollar. You've been in the workforce for 2 or 3 years before you get this major financial influx, which I mean, speaking from personal experience, that would totally, I think, skew my reality if I weren't prepared for it.
Well, I don't know how major it's going to be, Billy.
Okay. Here with my $8 latte.
Exactly. Yeah, so speaking of newly minted adults, if any of you are going to high school graduations this month, I strongly recommend that you bring up the topic or give your newly minted adult who's 18 years old advance directives. They need to do a healthcare proxy because at the age of 18, even though they don't look like it or act like it, they are technically adults, and mommy can no longer automatically make life and death decisions in the event of a hospitalization. So on my website, none of my colleagues out there should be charging for a healthcare proxy. Back in my misspent youth as a state legislator, I was a co-sponsor of the healthcare proxy law in New York State, and it's designed to be DIY. You don't need a lawyer to do a healthcare proxy. Go onto my website. There's an area with free forms that you can and should be doing on your own, and stick one of them in the graduation card that for the party that you're going to go to. How fun.
Important though.
Yeah.
I still want that say in my son's life. I really do.
Absolutely.
I have a question about that.
yeah.
You do a healthcare proxy. Who do I give that to? I print it out from my state's website, and then do I give it to the person who is the healthcare
No,
proxy?
Billy, you don't print it out from the state website.
Oh.
You print it
From myelderlawattorney.com.
Yes, myelderlawattorney.com. And so you print it out, you fill it out. It does not have to be notarized in New York. Simply two witnesses other than the person that you've named as your agent. You should be sure that you put your agent's cell phone number on it. The only room for error with a healthcare proxy is naming two agents at the same time. So you can't name mommy and daddy together,
I
right?
see.
You have one primary, one backup. And the best thing to do with the healthcare proxy is to take a picture of it with your phone so you always have it on you, and then text that picture to your named agent so they will always have the healthcare proxy on them.
I see.
The other thing that we want our youngsters to be protected from is a 43% divorce rate. So when I leave my assets in my trust, in my will, to Mary, Susie, and Johnny, I want to specify that I'm leaving it to them as their separate property. If one of my children has, a history of bad relationships and they're on their third marriage, I may want to say to Mary, Susie, and Johnny, on the condition that they take legal steps to keep inherited assets separate from what they may choose to commingle with a spouse or partner. And, to the last point on Gen Z is they are actually more likely to have prenups than any other generational cohort.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like a given for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I certainly wouldn't get married without a prenup.
I think, they've seen their parents divorce and, hopefully they're going to be smarter with their money. So Ann and Billy, thank you so much for joining today's discussion. And thank you, all of you out there, for listening. I hope that you visit me during the week at My Lawyer Ann and myassetprotectionattorney.com. Have a great day, everyone.